At this point, I'd like to invite Steve Warner and Mary Graham to join us up here at the podium. And I'd like for us to begin a question and answer session. And Grady, I think you're going to help us do the Phil Donahue role. And so thank you all for listening and appreciate your attention very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Earlier this morning we were debating whether it was Phil Donahue or Jerry Springer, but I think we'll do the Phil Donahue version.
A little cleaner.
A little cleaner, yeah. Less breakage of chairs.
That's right.
First off, I just want to start off by just making a comment, and that is that the fact that we've put out a scorecard now for 3 years. This is an extraordinarily courageous thing that's being done. Most of these studies are done all the time, communities all across the nation, probably the world. What usually happens is they pick out all the goodies and use it to make some marketing piece. And these guys are primarily responsible for marketing our community at the CRDA. But it's extraordinarily courageous to take the good, the bad, and the ugly and put it out there for everybody to see, and that just shows extraordinary leadership. And you can't make change happen unless you get everybody involved. And I think this is just a great way of doing it. And so I just want to commend you guys for doing that, because it takes a lot of courage to put this out there.
I think so. If I could just add too, I think our community is ready for this. It's a mature community versus, I've been here 19 years, and we've grown up as a market a lot. And just one example is when some of our leaders saw the innovation index that you saw on the chart about 3 years ago for the first time. Just to give you a seminal moment anecdote, I wasn't sure how our leadership was going to respond to being less than the national average when you've got a 12,000 employee medical university and you've got a lot of startups and a lot of good things going on in research. But what happened is our leadership in this community 3 years ago saw that data and said, instead of questioning the data or why are you showing our negative stuff or why are you going in that direction, they said, hey, David, can I have 20 of these for my board? Because I want to show them we've done a lot of good stuff, but we still have a lot of work to do. I mean, that you all should know, our community's elected business and academic leaders said that 3 years ago to this, and none of us were sure how that was going to, how they were going to react. And so thank you for saying that, Grady, because it is tough to put your, all your good and
it's risky, but it's an effective way of getting everybody involved, and so I just want to commend you guys for doing that and sticking with it.
Thank you.
I'm going to start us off here with a question, and then I'll just look around. If somebody's got a question, raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone over to you. And if not, I've got a few things that I've sort of ginned up. The first question would be, you guys have been doing this now, it's third year.
Yes.
The data that we've been seeing in the past didn't include the recession years. Now this data does. So just some comments from you guys. What does this show you about how our region came through the recession? Can you draw any conclusions about the region itself when you look at the data this year? What does that say about us, clawing our way through this thing?
You want to jump out there, guys?
Well, one of the things I think the data shows is that the Alliance was formed in '95 and developed its first economic development strategy that looked at what clusters we should focus on. And we're seeing the payoff of that effort going all the way there, that we've grown, we've developed a great niche in terms of skilled manufacturing in our community, and we've seen a lot of growth there. And so you're starting to see the real outcomes of that kind of focus and investment in our community on an economic development strategy that really is paying off now.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is I know a lot of businesses don't necessarily feel, Grady, you and I were talking earlier, things are going in the right direction, but you don't feel like you were 5 years ago or prior to the Great Recession.
I'm not doing the happy dance,
right.
No.
But in terms of looking at our community and, again, benchmarking against those in a competitive context, we are doing better than a lot of other communities. Again, still doesn't feel like we're blowing and going yet, but we're moving in the right direction. Mm-hmm. So.
Bryan, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the happy dance, Grady, is relative. And it all depends on where you're sitting. We have 2 brand new clusters. We're one of 3 places in the world to make a 787 wide-body jet. Clemson Wind Turbine Testing Facility will be the largest wind energy testing facility in the world. That's 2 foxtrots, or 2, you know, 2 big-time happy dances. The other thing that one of the charts shows so perfectly is the professional and service job growth that we're experiencing in clusters that create a spin-off in the community where 3 or 4 or 5 jobs are related to each job in that industry. Normally, aerospace, very conservatively, for every job at Boeing, there'll be 4 additional jobs generated in the community. So some of the happy dance has to do with that manufacturing multiplier effect. So I think we've done very well in that time period, and it's exciting to think about where we can go in the future. So Steve's right. You just got to think about where we are compared to other communities that are really still taking a significant beating.
Grady, the only thing I would add, I would call all our guests today to page 4 when you get a chance, and it's the summary chart relative to our gross regional product over the last 5 years. I think that tells the story, Grady, that we were through the before recession and after the recession. These numbers are included in there, and you see from that one summary chart that we have done better than our peer metros, except those aspirational ones. And I think, to me, it just says, yeah, we're doing great. Got through the recession probably better than many, but a lot of opportunity to improve.
Okay, any questions yet from the audience? I've got a microphone coming right behind you.
You talk about investments in education to transform the workforce. In your estimation, what do those investments look like, and where does the money come from to make that happen?
I can just comment on one initiative that's really excited me, and it's this notion of a cradle to career kind of initiative. And I don't know if that rings true with anyone in here because it's something we don't have in our market, but several of us have visited Cincinnati and Nashville and Austin and heard about other places in Oregon and so on that have implemented in the last 10 short years or less this notion of a cradle to career alignment initiative. And I can tell you our community leadership with Anita Zucker's kind of passion and drive for education, but elected leaders, business leaders, academic leaders rallying around the notion of what a Nashville saw, for example, 7 short years ago, graduation rates at 58% in the Nashville metro area. After an alignment Nashville, or this cradle to career initiative has been in place there for 7 years, their graduation rate in their market is 84% today. That is exciting to me relative to your education question. It means it's not, it's not someone else's problem. It's not another generation's challenge. It is what the Metro Chamber is leading a delegation next week to Nashville, among other things, but to learn about Alignment Nashville and how did they do that in 7 short years, and how can we do that here? So that's something that excites me because it's not a 30-year challenge. We can do it in a relatively short period of time. Bryan, you want to?
Yeah, I think two of the undergirding pieces that we're seeing in school systems like Davidson County and Nashville, Pensacola, Florida, Greater Cincinnati, Ohio, they're looking at 2 things. Number one, they're looking at the dollars that go into each classroom. That is an investment. It is critical that we measure up to areas that are very competitive with us in assuring that we have more dollars dedicated to the classroom. The second thing that Alignment Nashville and Strive in Cincinnati have done very well is they have opened the schools up to businesses, supporting neighborhoods, parents, other organizations. In Nashville, each high school issues something called an ITP, an invitation to participate in helping them meet the school goals each year. The first year they did it, they couldn't get them filled up. Last year, they were turning people away. Dollars are significant, but partnerships and commitment to high school graduation, to preparing young people to enter elementary school, and watching them throughout each phase. David talked about both the cradle to career piece. One of the things we're doing through that in our Accelerate Greater Charleston program is looking at where we have the gaps in both readiness prior to kindergarten and then all the way through high school graduation and on to college. So I think as a community we have to be very analytical about not duplicating efforts that are already occurring and finding out where we need to place dollars and partnerships to carry through each young person to be successful. So got to be very detailed and analytical, and at the same time we have to have the partnerships.
I've got a question here.
I just have a quick question. Huge supporter of what we're doing for education. Is there any data or have we done any work on workforce development for people who are current employees, they're at their jobs, being trained to kind of keep up with the global economy as new people are coming in, almost like the parents catching up to the kids type of thing?
That's a critical piece as well. And one of the programs through our Accelerate Greater Charleston program that we're doing is an adult education pilot project, modeling after one in Cherokee County in the upstate that's been highly successful. We have a large percentage of our population that left high school, didn't finish it, went back, got a GED. A lot of adults in the workplace today that are working with that GED and didn't go on to finish college or even a 2-year degree at Trident, and could be highly successful. They just don't have the confidence in many cases to pursue that advanced degree. And so we're working on a pilot project to actually take a group of adults through a program to help prepare them to be successful as they enter a place like Trident Tech.
That's terrific. Thank you.
I want to go back and add in, we talked about investing in K-12 and how we do that. We didn't mention higher education, and just a quick data point, our state cut higher education, I think, more than 24% over the last 10 years. Funding, that's the deepest cut of all but about 3 states in the nation. So we've got some issues we've got to address there. And so there's 2 points there. One, we've got to really look at that as an investment, not as a cost. The second thing is we've got to align those training that the higher education folks are doing to turn out great talent, and got to align that with our workforce needs here in the region. So there's work going on with that as well. So.
Thank you for sharing what you saw and what you've been tracking for the last 3 years. The challenge I put up, and you may already have this in place, but it's just not apparent to me yet, is one thing is to report on numbers, which is really looking backwards, and you're comparing yourself to others. Have we selected any of these key particular areas to put targets in place for looking forward, whether it's 1, 3, 5 years, and putting it out there? And I align that with the thinking of John F. Kennedy when he says, by the end of this decade, we're going to put a man on the moon, and more importantly, bring him safely back. Have we put very aggressive targets in place in particular areas so that we could put a highlight on that, create much more aggressive thinking and accountability to achieve those things? Once you start measuring something and put a target out there, it's amazing how much it could influence behavior, and in some cases, create thinking and a can-do attitude rather than, well, how are we doing against others, and are we at the head or at the end of the pack? So that's one of the questions I look at. Are we really pushing for those aggressive targets, not comfortable targets, aggressive targets so we can leapfrog?
I want to start in answering your question with regard to talent. There are multiple efforts that are occurring right now that will be putting significant measurements in place. You've heard us mention Cradle to Career. That's really going to launch in January, but I think it just launched this morning. There's going to be over 60 organizations that are coming together, and they will have aggressive performance benchmarks for everything from birth through graduation from graduate school, all along that continuum. To give you one example, our 14 public high schools, next fall we'll be starting career academies across all 3 school systems in 14 high schools, culinary arts, health sciences, science, technology, engineering, and math. Rising 9th graders will be able to enter into those career academies. We think that 4 years from their entry in, we're going to see graduation rates increase. The other goal is by the end of the decade to have those high schools along with collaborative cooperation from superintendents, principals, teachers, moving to more and more career academies, hopefully wall to wall. When you enter 9th grade in Davidson County Public Schools in Nashville, you go into a career academy. So you have project-based learning, like experiences for your curriculum, similarly motivated students, and that's why they're seeing that spike in their graduation rate. So very aggressive in that area, but there are pieces along the way in that continuum where you're going to see like efforts, some that are already well underway, but we're going to have clear benchmarking in the talent piece. The other thing that I mentioned earlier is we're going to have a community handprint that's going to be done in January that'll look at 7 indexes for attracting and maintaining 20 to 40-year-olds in our community. Then it's time to roll our sleeves up and go to work. We know that housing affordability is an issue for them. We're thinking about places like Kansas City that have looked at providing a 5-year subsidy for recent college grads with their downtown housing. They're really attracting a lot of college grads because guess where recent college grads want to live? Downtown. So again, how do we find ways to encourage and incentivize the outcomes that we need in that talent area? And David and Steve and Mary have a lot of other thoughts, but that's one example of how we want to carefully benchmark performance expectations against results.
And if I could add, because I think your question's a great one. I was just with a new executive, well, in a new assignment yesterday morning. He's head of North America for his company and over all their investments and over all their stuff. And he was kind of in the sweater, slumped down in a chair. You know, you wouldn't have thought he was as fancy. He didn't want you to think he was fancy. But his questions were exactly about what you asked. Does your community have target industries and core competencies that you're focused on for the future? I mean, that's fine. You just told me how great you are and all that. But and I proudly was able to pull out, on behalf of our 3-county market, this thing we call Opportunity Next, which is an economic development strategy for the future, aligning, as we talked about earlier, workforce development, community development, and economic development. That is the new paradigm for communities that get it right. It's aligning. It sounds maybe to many of you very theoretical or very fluffy or whatever word, but it is powerful. Any community we go to today that is doing it well, like the ones we have indicated in this scorecard, you go from meeting to meeting to meeting, leader to leader to leader over a 2-3 day period, and you hear the same thing, you know? And you know they can't be just calling each other that day. And so for our market, it's Opportunity Next that focuses on 4 target industries, all based on globally competitive assets under them, as Bryan alluded to, and 5 core competencies like logistics and software, things that cut across 2, 3, or all 4 of those target industries and all the work around it. So we're in year 2 of implementing that, and I can tell you from the guy yesterday morning, that resonates with real executives in the world. They appreciate that, yeah, you've done some good things, yeah, and in fact, I usually don't give this out, but he asked all the questions that were in the scorecard, and I said, you know, it's not a marketing piece, but here. And I gave him a summary of Opportunity Next, which also he appreciated. So great question, and I can tell you our community is focused, we are targeted, and you all need to know that is different than many communities. It is hard. I'm not complimenting us. Grady was nice enough to say that.
Go ahead and compliment us.
It's hard to do this, and it's hard to do targeting. Think about economic development folks like us around the country. There are about 14,000 economic development organizations in our country alone. And most of them just say, we want business. We want anything, you know, we're open for business. And that sounds good politically. It is not a very good strategy with a global CEO that's trying to make strategic decisions. They want to know they're aligned with the community that gets it. And so that's a longer answer than you maybe wanted, but it's a great question. Thank you for asking.
We're right up against the edge of when we need to quit, but I do have one more question in the back. We're gonna do that one, then we probably need to get out of here.
Good morning. My name is Paul Messerschmidt with South Star Capital, and I applaud the panel and all of the people who put together the economic scorecard. My question goes to access to capital. And while we're not in the venture capital business, what's important is after those venture capital firms survive that crucible of early stage activity is to make sure that there's access to capital so they continue to stay in the Charleston area and now join the great pool of small businesses who also have need to access to capital. The latest Federal Reserve numbers indicate that the acceptance or approval rate from banks for small business is only about 11%. The Thomson Reuters index to capital hasn't really moved that needle off of where it was back in 2008, 2009. Not that I want banks to give away free money, and we're certainly not giving away free money, but I would encourage, first of all, to include metrics which capture some of this access to capital to those small businesses, which indeed are the growth engines for Charleston, for the United States. And what work is being done, for example, in conjunction with the Small Business Association to maintain that financial infrastructure. So if we grow these wonderful venture capital founded businesses, that they stay here in Charleston, and then again, all the supply chain people who are the small businesses who have been around for a long time are able to again survive here in the Charleston area. So I would encourage the committee to include some metrics, again, to access to capital, what's going on in terms of acceptance rates, and that the businesses that grow to have confidence that they will have access to capital and stay here in the wonderful Charleston area. Thank you.
I think that was a question and a response. It was actually well said. I just would call your attention to page 11 in the scorecard, because I think it addresses some of that, not exactly the financing part, but what happens when Bryan and I talk about companies coming here, expanding, new companies starting. We in economic development, especially Mary and researchers that really understand the numbers, talk about multipliers. So for one manufacturing job in aerospace, that might equate to 3 additional jobs in the community. You've heard that kind of multiplier effect. Well, on page 11, this is the real world account of the last 5 years in our market of what multiplier looks like in real businesses. And it's pretty powerful of the new businesses that have spawned, not just because they had a great idea, but in response to many of the growing businesses that are already here. The Boeings, the Cummins, the Bosches, the Sprinter Mercedes vans, and DuPont Kevlar, and just a long list of companies. These companies, these startups have responded to that. That is a true startup multiplier, and how those get financed obviously remains a challenge to your earlier point, but I wanted to at least call your attention to that.
How many financial lenders do we have in the audience today? Have you guys seen a lot of banks coming in the community in the last 2 years? More on the way. So one of the things David's pointing to is as our current clusters and our new emerging clusters grow, assets will come into the community to help us leverage their growth. Macroeconomic policy and federal policy is kind of tough. As long as that regulatory chokehold at the federal level is tight, it has an impact on the lending ability locally. So I think we're seeing more and more assets, and I think that the financial institutions want to be able to support and help the growth. So I think some of it's a matter of timing, but it's great to see those assets coming in the community that they can be leveraged effectively. And as we grow, those supply chains build out, we'll have more and more of that.
One of the things that we're looking at next week and when we're in Nashville is their area of small business development, entrepreneurial development, and innovation. So we'll be there studying what they're doing. And we've also looked very closely at the markets like Raleigh and Austin and what they're doing there as well. And one of the things we have to kind of keep in mind is Raleigh, we think of an overnight success. Well, the Research Triangle Park opened over 50 years ago. And in Austin, their growth really started about 30 years ago. So they're far ahead of us, and we've got a lot of catching up to do as we move forward.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up. Before I do, I just want to assure everyone in these tables right here the suntan was free, so no charge there. I want to thank you guys for being on the panel. Thank our sponsors for making this this possible. We can't do these events without these good sponsors stepping up. And remind everyone that our next event will be in November, right, Kathy? November 1, and we're going to tackle commercial and residential real estate. So thank you guys for coming, and give everyone a hand.